Did you know that Ranni had a sister? I wouldn't be surprised if not, since that is to be expected. After all, the only hint at Ranni's sister is within the item description of one talisman, which isn't really that great, to be honest. From Ichi, the Carian blacksmith and war counselor of Ranni, you can get the Carian filigree crest, and in its item description you can read the following paragraph. An honor said to have once been awarded to Carian knights who served as direct retainers to the kingdom's princesses. Now there's only one princess, Ranni, daughter of Renala. Now, from these lines we can learn two things. First off, Renala and Radagon had even more children than we were aware of. So far, Radan, Rykard and Ranni are confirmed to be children of Renala and Radagon, but the word princesses clearly indicates that Renala and Radagon had more than 3 children. How many more is unclear though. It could be just one more daughter or even more than that. Second, something must have happened to Ranni's sister or sisters. Further hints to any events as to why Ranni is now the only Carian princess are non-existent. As such, only speculations can be made as to what happened to Ranni's sister or sisters. Unless we get more hints or a backstory in any future Elden Ring DLCs, this point will be highly debatable. As such, here's my theory as to what happened to Ranni's sister or sisters, plus who I believe might have been a Carian princess in the past. Let's begin by determining the total number of Carian princesses. I believe that there were only a total of 2 princesses. My reasoning for this comes not from an item description, but mainly from one hint given by From Software's world design. As we know, the area behind the Carian Manor is called Three Sisters. The 3 towers in this area are obviously the reason for the name of this area. However, there seems to be more to this area after looking at it a second time. Did you notice that the towers Ranni's and Renna's rise are built on a higher ground than the tower Seluvis is occupying? You could argue that it might be just a random design choice by From Software, but I believe that there's more to this. My theory regarding their higher position is that these 2 towers house Carian royalty. As far as we know, each tower in Elden Ring is home to a sorcerer, and it is custom to name a tower after its inhabitant. As to why each tower's name ends with rise is another hypothesis for another time and irrelevant in this case. So subscribe if you wanna hear my thoughts on this in the future. Now, if these 2 towers actually house Carian royalty, then it would explain them having the high ground. After all, it signifies that these 2 towers are of higher importance than Seluvis' rise, which is understandable since Seluvis is not a member of the Carian royal family. Plus, there's nothing supporting the potential claim that Seluvis' rise belonged to Carian royalty in the past. Furthermore, Ranni is still residing in her tower. I found it hard to believe that Ranni had kicked out another sorcerer and claimed this tower for herself. Such an action would be too out of character for her. As such, Ranni's rise most likely belonged to her already when Ranni still had her actual body. This in turn gives my point more credibility, and it is safe to assume that the towers Ranni's and Renna's rise belong to Carian princesses. Though I would go even further and interpret the area also in one other way. Out of the 3 towers, we know and have met 2 of its inhabitants, but what about Renna's rise? Due to the naming convention, we know that the first word of a tower's name stands for the sorcerer inhabiting it. You can make the claim of Renna's rise belonging to Queen Renala due to the similarity of the 2 names. But if this were the case, then why not name it Renala's rise? Well, because Renna is or rather was the name of the other Carian princess. If you're familiar with the naming convention George R.R. Martin used for the demigods, then you know that he used the parents' names as a basis for new names. Hence the similarities between Godfrey, Godwin, Godric, and so forth. As such, the names of Ranni and Renna are certainly derived from Radagon and Renala and represent the 2 Carian princesses. As a result, we can deduce 2 things from this area. First is the name of the other Carian princess. It is most likely Renna due to the tower next to Ranni's being called Wenna's Rise. And second, that Ranni has or had only one other sister. With this, we are already closer to knowing Ranni's sister, but everything else from this point forward are purely my speculations, which aren't really based on anything, so take it with a grain of salt. I believe that Melina was Ranni's sister at one point in time. To be even more precise, I think Melina ceased to be Ranni's sister just right before the shattering. More on this later. First, let me show you why I believe that Melina is Ranni's sister. There are a few signs throughout Elden Ring that made me wonder over time why those are in the game. The first one comes through Ranni's dialogue when you meet her for the first time and she introduces herself as Wenna. Right before she gives you the spirit summoning bell, Ranni says that she was instructed to give you the bell by Torrent's former master. But who owned Torrent before us? Well, Melina did. After all, the very first cutscene we see her in is after being defeated by the grafted scorpion. And there, we can clearly make out that Melina rides Torrent. As such, I think it is fair to assume that Ranni is referring to Melina in this line of dialogue, which supports but at the same time also undermines my theory. We know for a fact that Ranni interacted with Torrent's former master in name Melina. So, why didn't Ranni instead say that Melina instructed her to give you the spell? And the only way I can make sense of this is through my assumption as to what happened to Ranni's sister. I believe that the Melina we encounter and speak to was an entirely different person before the shattering. Something must have happened to transform her into the Melina we know her as, which most likely involves Marika. But instead of going deeper into my thoughts here, I will do so later. Let's finish the remaining hints first. My next point builds on the knowledge of the previous hint. We now know that Ranni was instructed by Melina, Torrent's former master, to give you the spirit summoning bell. But this very fact begs another question. Why didn't Melina herself give you the bell instead? She does hand you the whistle to summon Torrent, but why not the summoning bell? The most likely explanation is that Melina simply doesn't have it anymore. This, however, gives rise to another question. When was she in possession of it? My theory is that Melina, or Wenna as we have already established, used the bell when she lived as the Carian princess. I presume Melina was, or still is to some extent, very proficient with summoning spirits, or even created magic related to spirits. We know for certain that the Carian family is proficient in spirit summoning. Not only do we see Rennala summoning spirits in her boss fight, but even Ichi is a summon with a manifested body. The tombstone in his open chest is almost identical to the sign we see when we can summon spirits. As such, someone in the family must have found a way to bind spirits to the physical realm in which we, the players, move in. And only the other Carian princess could fit the bill for this, since no other Carian royal family member is really related to spirit summoning. And I think the game even hints at Melina's spirit magic through a special mechanic only available to her at certain sites of grace. Melina somehow can or listen to echoes of past events, an ability exclusive to her as far as we know. If she has this ability not just for being a spirit herself, then it would solidify my point. But again, we don't know anything really about spirits or the realm they inhabit. As such, it is also possible that other spirits can see echoes from the past. As for my last point, I want to show you the similarity I see between Ranni and Melina. If we compare both of their faces, we can definitely see some similarities. First off, both have a similar face structure. Excluding the nose and mouth, their cheek and jaw lines are almost identical. Naturally, we cannot really compare Ranni's doll body to Melina. After all, her doll body was fashioned after Ranni's secret mentor and doesn't represent her actual body as such. However, I doubt that From Software designed both bodies with some similar features without a purpose behind it. In addition, why would they give both characters just one open or healthy eye? Plus, both seem to have the same scar or tattoo motif on the representative closed eye. I don't know about your opinions, but those are in total a couple of too many similarities to just dismiss them as a coincidence. Lastly, Melina has the signature red hair to mark her as one of Radagon's children. This in turn supports my point that she is related to the Carrion royal family like Ranni, as well as all the other children of Rennala and Radagon. However, at the same time, it also supports the, at this point, fact that Melina's parents are Marika and Radagon. Which brings us to the point in my theory making Melina being Ranni's sister invalid. You can say that both are stepsisters but not actual sisters due to each of their parents. However, the other 2 points, Melina being the former master of Torrent and the summoning bell, clearly suggest a connection between Ranni and Melina in some form. As such, I think the solution to harmonize my last point with the other 2 lies with the time before Melina's creation within the Earth Tree. Hence why I would like to introduce to you my theory as to how Melina was created and her time before becoming Melina. We know through Melina's dialogue that her mother is inside the Earth Tree. Through the final boss fight as well as other in-game instances, we learn that Marika is the only person inside the Earth Tree. As a result, it is basically a given that Marika is Melina's mother. But at the same time, with all the other evidence previously shown, suggesting that there is a connection between Ranni and Melina. So, how can I make all of this sense from a lore point of view? I have constructed the following theory based on all of my lore knowledge to reconcile both aspects. Here's what I believe happened in the past. Marika needed a catalyst or rather an excuse to further her plan, which aimed at causing the Shadowing. To this end, she had to end the peaceful state in the lands between. As to why she decided the war known as the Shadowing is unknown and up for debate, which is something I will eventually address in a video in the future. But what we definitely know is that Marika cannot defy the greater will directly without being punished, as we have seen at the end of the game. As such, she has to cause a war indirectly without the greater will suspecting her. And only through causing disputes among the demigods was something like this conceivable. After all, the Golden Order was the only dominant present faction, and even its archenemy, the Carrion family and the Academy of Rhea Lucaria, were integrated into the Order to some extent through the marriage between Radagon and Rennala. To give this point at least some credibility, let's look at a fact from outside of the game. George R.R. Martin worked on the outline for Elden Ring, and a major plot point in his Game of Thrones books are the power struggles between families and betrayal, a story device he might have also used for Elden Ring's lore. To get back to my theory though, Marika's best chance for disputes lied with an Empyrean affiliated with Caria and the Academy. If a third war between Liurnia and the Earth Tree were to happen, then this would be ideal for her plan, and the only demigod fitting the bill in this case is Ranni. Marika wagered that Ranni would rebel against the greater will and the Golden Order if she had a sufficient reason, and probably only the death of a close loved one would be enough to start Ranni down the path Marika intended for her. As such, Marika ordered a Numen Black Knife assassin to disguise herself as Blythe in order to get close to Ranni's loved ones. And once this assassin had infiltrated the Carrion family, she had to kill the Carrion princess, Renna. Through Renna's assassination, it would have been easy for Marika to somehow obtain Renna's soul. And with her soul in Marika's possession, she used the power of the Elden Ring to transform this soul into the Melina we now know, and giving her the mission to burn down the Earth Tree. Then, as soon as Ranni learned of her sister's death, and with evidence hinting at the Golden Order as the culprit, all the events transpired as we have learned in the game. Ranni stole destined death from Malekith with Rykard's help and instigate the Knight of the Black Knives to kill Godwyn, whom Ranni possibly suspected to be the culprit behind Renna's death. With so much turmoil brewing and using the grief of her son's death as an excuse, Marika shattered the Elden Ring. And through this act, she signaled the start for the shattering to happen and, consequentially, the beginning of her plans. Now, I do hope that you take this with a grain of salt and kept in mind that I based this on little to none evidence whatsoever. After all, Marika's motives remain as of now unknown to us, and those are very vital to really understand what happened in the time period before the shattering. As such, my theory isn't solid and only an attempt to explain as to why I believe Melina to be Ranni's sister. But in the end, what I think we can take away from my video is that Ranni definitely had a sister and probably just one. I believe that Melina is, or rather was, Ranni's sister, but do you agree with my reasoning? Share your opinions with me in the comments. I'm curious to see what your opinions are regarding the identity of Ranni's sister and whether you agree with my reasoning for Melina. And if you want to see more of my thoughts and theories on the lore of Elden Ring, then subscribe to my channel. My next video will be about the true form of the Elden Ring, which will come out somewhere in the future. Until then, ciao!